What's up, guys? I'm EJ Stewart, joined by Kendall, and today we're talking about episode 11 of Young Justice Phantoms. This episode, Kendall, titled Teg Ydaer, or if you're doing the magician spell in the backwards words, it would be Get Ready. Kendall, this was, I think, so far my favorite episode of the arc. It's a very interesting arc because they rely so much on exposition and so much on continuing to tell stories about past versions of Vandal Savage, but I think its ability to connect that Vandal Savage to a character that we know is going to be very much in the forefront for the rest of this arc, which is we expect to be one more episode in Doctor Strange and Nabu, and answering some questions we asked about last week about
Dr. Fate.
Doctor Fate. I'm sorry, I said Doctor Strange. I don't know why. You've seen Spider-Man, Marvel. It's been a long week for superhero fans here, but Doctor Fate and given the stuff we learned about Doctor Fate and some of the questions we had about the relationship between Nabu and Vandal Savage. Shout out to some of the viewers who watch our videos, and they were giving us some comments about some previous episodes that kind of spoke a little bit about the connection between Fate and Nabu, and that got explained in even greater fashion here. And this episode also had a really big effort to further kind of tell the backstories of the young Sentinels, the young students for Zatanna, that being Tracy 13, Mary, Broomfield, and Khalid Nasor. I really thought this episode had a lot to pack in. I thought they did a pretty good job. What did you think of the episode?
Yeah, I mean, I thought the episode was alright. I mean, I liked the Doctor Fate character, and I liked, sort of diving into his backstory some more. Because he's played such a pivotal role in this series throughout the seasons, despite, obviously not being, a Young Justice member and sort of not being one of your quote unquote flagship league members, and they kind of talk about that in this episode, how he's sort of, a Lone Ranger in a lot of respects, despite having, league membership. So I'm excited to talk about all that, but I thought that was a cool part of this episode, and obviously, again, anytime Vandal Savage's origin is expanded upon, you tend to get some good stories. So yeah, I mean, there was definitely some good stuff in this episode.
So let's begin kind of talking about the Vandal Savage stuff, because it begins the episode, and we learn very quickly that in this episode, though I'll be honest, on my first watch, I didn't realize it, but as I watched it the second time, I realized I should have realized it much earlier. But we learn, we're continuing the story about Vandal Savage. We're now almost 8,000 years past the falling of Atlantis, and now he's the ruler of Babylon. And this story is being told from the perspective of Dr. Fate, or Nabu, and his voice that's telling this story about what happened in Babylon, continuing to kind of link what's going on with the Lords of Order and Chaos today, and how it affects how it links to what happened, thousands and thousands, really millions of years ago at a certain point. So again, we learn about the relationship between Nabu and Marduk. It was just his new name in this iteration of Dr. Fate. Vandal Savage. He went from Valjot to now Marduk as the leader of Babylon. And essentially, it stems from one, that being his son kind of his like top lieutenant, running the ship, and running the civilization on Babylon. But the issue that kind of arises that ends up causing this eventual death of Nabu is his discontent with what he's built in Babylon, despite it being, again, a pretty strong civilization. He doesn't like that. He basically feels like his soldiers, his men are lackeys, and they're fat and lazy. And he's like, you need to get these guys into real shape, and I don't know how to do it. And that's where Clarion kind of comes in and once again wreaks havoc. This time bringing the alien Starro, and what Marduk hoped would be in a way to mind control all of these soldiers who he wants to be working much harder to kind of follow his rule. Instead, it ends up kind of becoming a bloodbath and a civil war that ends up being the death of his son Nabu. Before we get into how Nabu then kind of how he kind of gets linked up with the Lords of Order, what did you make of just kind of the backstory that we had a lot of questions about last week? They got answered pretty fast.
Yeah, I mean, Obviously, it was a curious moment for us when you know he referred to Vandal Savage's father, and so we got some of that backstory in this episode. I thought this Vandal Savage origin probably wasn't as interesting as the Atlantis storyline or the the sort of the
Yeah.
caveman, Neanderthal savage
Yeah,
storyline. But
Ang, I think his name was Ang, or
was there a Vandar?
Vandar Ang, maybe something like that.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, there was both of those storylines I thought were a little bit more engaging, but this one was also interesting when you add in again the context that this is something that we wanted to know more about,
Mm-hmm.
and something that they sort of foreshadowed and teased that they were gonna expand upon. You would think at some point, and they did. Greg Weisman doesn't leave these things in there for no reason, drop these
Right.
things in there for no reason.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Use lines and every little word matters, and maybe throw something in there that sort of not even if it doesn't make sense or you maybe isn't as familiar to the general audience. They'll find ways to explain it, like we've seen with the Mary Broomfield character.
Yeah.
You didn't have to necessarily know everything about her initially to watch this series because eventually they were gonna show you, not just tell you, but show you who she is, so that you don't have to go
And
to
that's the
Wikipedia
and that
to figure
and
out.
what I like about Young Justice is they find a way to, lay these tea leaves that lead you in a direction to kind of understand where this is going, but you never fully understand exactly how it's going to go. And just reading a Wikipedia page might not, it'll help you, but it might end up being a slight deviation when you actually watch the show because we know that Weisman and Brandon Vietti, they like to take, kind of diverging paths from maybe what the true or original or most well-known canon is for some of these characters, and we see that with Mary Broomfield even in this episode. And we'll talk about her a little bit later. But I thought, to me, I kind of like this concept that Clarion once again continues to kind of be this, just like, even though Vandal has this idea that Clarion is helping me, he continues to be this kind of thorn in his side. And here, there really isn't much upside to what we get with this Starro invasion that ends up killing his son and decimating his army and kind of just overall kind of just really messing up his situation. That then transitions to what the Lords of Order were looking at, because as Nabu explains, the Lords of Order, unlike the Lords of Chaos, they didn't like to come down to Earth. They didn't want to really, intervene in that very, physical way. They preferred to kind of use the means of humans on Earth in hopes that using them as quote unquote agents of order, because they thought that their connection to Earth would allow them to kind of root out the uprisings of chaos firsthand. But as they saw with Arian, that didn't quite work as well. And that kind of was an escalation, as Nabu explains it, when Clarion did what he did, and they realized they had to adjust. So that then brings them to this idea to say, you know what, this guy Nabu was special, because despite him defying his father and him dying, it's important to note that his father right now is really basically pissing them off. He's this very big ally to the Lords of Chaos, and he continues to kind of mess things up for them. And the fact that his son, someone so close to him, was willing to say, yo, man, this is a bad idea, you shouldn't do this, and that he was so well respected on Babylon, a place that was so ruled with such an iron fist by someone like Marduk, they kind of looked at him and recruited him and said, you know what, he would be a good piece for us. And that leads them to create their first Lord of Order on Earth, being Dr. Fate. They essentially they take the spirit of Nabu and infuse it with the magic of his helmet, and then use that as an anchor to create this hero that would then fight to restore order on Earth. The story, as they told it, you felt made sense to you. I know that the Laws of Order and Chaos stuff can be very complicated for some, and I've read online some people have been trying to follow this stuff. I thought that they did a pretty good job explaining it, but I don't know. What do you think?
Uh, I mean, I think they're trying their best. It's the most I'll say. I mean, I think it's going to be a confusing sort of concept. It's going to be a foreign concept to a lot of people.
Hmm.
They're devoting time to it. In some ways, I think it's probably hurting this arc because it's just so
It's very
dense
dense.
and
Yeah.
in all of this expedition,
Hmm.
but it's necessary. I mean, is it necessary? You could argue. Could you find ways to just fast forward? Some of that stuff probably, um, but like that's not the show that these guys are trying to tell.
Yeah.
They're trying to tell a story that we haven't seen in this form,
Yeah.
ever. Like anytime you see Doctor Fate in any medium, they don't really dig into his origin.
Yeah.
That's for a comic book, for a lot of people. In this show, Greg Weisman's like, no, we're gonna do this for the first time, pretty much ever, animated, and that's it's interesting and digging into Vandal Savage's origin and all of his stuff. Like every time you see Vandal Savage, you know he's immortal. They don't really
Right.
dig into where what he was doing, during the
The beginning, the
during
beginnings of
the
time,
DC,
and even
beginning
if
of
they do
time.
maybe kind of sneak in some of the time he first comes in contact with the stone, like
It's like one
yeah,
scene.
and they won't go into like maybe they'll see like quick flashes of things he's done throughout time, but they won't
Right,
actually
exactly.
sit there and say,
It's
hey,
a
here's a time
yeah,
in 10,000 BC where he's running this civilization. That's not something that they
yeah,
really do. So you're right that YJ is definitely going more in depth with that.
yeah,
This is also, you say this is a different show. I would almost argue that this is a different arc. Like to me, what I'm learning very quickly, I'm enjoying this a lot. I can see how some people it might be a little much, but this is a totally different arc than the arc we had just previous to, especially the last one,
yeah,
where it was much more driven on action, much more driven on the mystery of what is going on. Here, there
yeah,
really isn't any mystery with anything that's going on here. It's they're telling you everything, but they have to because it's kind of a complicated concept. So there is going to
yeah,
be no kind of what's the word? I mean, there's some stories regarding kind of like seeing again that he built Atlantis. Like the stories are interesting, but there's not going to be any twists in regards to actually pulling the rug out from you or anything like that. So, but I'm still enjoying it. I love the explanation of how they came to Doctor Fate. I thought it made a lot of sense, and I thought that it was a really nice kind of I thought it connected well to what we were then seeing happen in the present, which was Zatanna, after bringing her Sentinels to Tower of Fate in Salem to recruit Doctor Fate to get into this fight, a fight that he doesn't want to get into because he has come up with this theory that I'm not intervening with two Chaos Lords fighting each other. Like that's not my job. Basically,
right,
I don't care about this, and my job is to restore order, and I'll do that once these clowns finish fighting each other. But that this is not Fate's fight to be in. Two Chaos Lords fighting each other, or who's going to be on Earth. And it's ironic because Zatanna is like, look, I thought the same thing, and part of me kind of wonders like, is this like Zatara feeling the same way as Nabu, and that's kind of why we were seeing like Zatanna thinking the same way like her father perhaps. But it was interesting as the episode went on that Zatara from the very beginning was like, you don't understand anything about your own history, let alone this situation, and why it's important for us to intervene and to listen to her to get us to engage in this fight. I thought that this is a very interesting arc because, as I said before, and I saw a Zatanna fan Twitter account mention it. Apologies for not shouting you out. I don't remember the Twitter handle, but they mentioned that this was an episode and it's setting up to be an arc that just really just isn't gonna kind of go in depth with Zatanna because this episode, the B plot, ended up really centering way more. Even you could argue it's A or B. Again, the Vandal Savage stuff kind of really conflates things, but I would almost consider it the B plot. Really was much more of a dive into the backstories of Tracy 13, Khalid, and Mary Broomfield, which I thought in the the Tracy was cool. It's just typical, insecurities and imposter syndrome that having her talk through that I thought was neat, and their mechanism for doing it. That it was her voice that was saying these things about her that was in her head. Um, and first of all, you want to talk about creepy moments like the freaking all the puppets when they got big.
Oh,
Yeah, the Blue Beetle. I mean that was just like that was like that was reminding me a lot of like the Miss Minutes stuff from Loki. I was like, Jesus, this is getting very weird. But I really thought the Mary and the Khalid uh, uh, angles in this kind of test that Dr. Fate had sent them through were actually the stronger parts of the Fate test, and particularly maybe Mary's. I think maybe was the strongest. But what'd you make of those moments in this episode?
um, so yeah, I mean, first on the Doctor Fate sort of struggle that he was having as a character, I thought that was
Mm-hmm.
cool. I thought the conversation that Zatara has with him is very
Yeah,
interesting, and like I said, it called kind of it called back to Doctor Fate's usual sort of place in the DC universe. It's sort of being an outsider, no pun intended, and whether it be with the Justice League or the JSA. And I like the shot of the JSA where they also let the Minutemen
oh
from
yeah, that was
Watchmen
great. Yeah, really cool for sure.
with Alan Scott um, and Jay Garrick and
Yeah,
all those guys. But yeah, I mean, I thought that was interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, and also the thing with the Doctor Fate thing, also it reminded me a lot of Avatar, where Aang goes into the Avatar state and he sees all the previous
yeah,
avatars, and so it really called you back to the history. Now, to be fair, they didn't. I mean, I didn't even know. Did they even show Kent
yeah. Ken
Nelson?
Nelson is all.
I think they showed
He's
him like
Ken
one time.
Nelson is like yeah, and when they line them up, I like obviously they don't have footage of Kent Nelson in Young Justice fighting people, but when they line
Right.
them up, and
Yeah.
Zatara was like, these are the people that have been. Was Ken Nelson was like on the far right? He was the last one.
Right.
So
Right.
I
Right.
thought that was cool that they had him in there. But yeah, it was weird that like you see like like Young Justice has done a lot with the Fate character because of course.
I totally forgot Aqualad was ever Doctor Fate.
Yeah, yeah,
I remember Wally. I
yeah.
remember Zatanna. Obviously Zatara. I was like Aqualad.
Yeah, I kind of vaguely, I kind
Okay.
of had to be reminded of that as well. Um, yeah, I thought that was cool. I thought and I thought that they're, again, Zatara kind of breaking down, the reasons as to why he needs to join this fight. I thought were important. He essentially says, like, look, like you consider yourself this like solo champion, this solo guy that just does everything by himself. And while yes, you are somewhat of an outsider, like you know the Lords of Order didn't come didn't bestow didn't descend have you descend on Earth as just yourself. They needed two champions, and that required you to use the strength of the hosts that you were using, and those hosts had various different strengths that some included faith, some included different things. For him, he talks about it was his Christian faith that allowed him to just like survive this hell of being trapped with Nabu all these years, and also that it was to him it was obviously these hosts that oftentimes convinced him to join other causes in order to help the world and continue his mission to maintain order on Earth. And that if you've been doing that all this time, like why wouldn't you listen to my daughter now telling you that this is what needs to be done in order to forward your mission? This is not someone else's mission. This is your mission that was given to you by the Lords of Order. So like considering how all of us have helped you out, why won't you help them basically forward your work? I thought it was a very compelling case, and I thought it was cool. And I think that touching religion on these shows can be very touchy. And I think between I thought I want to get to what the Cliff stuff. I think that there's some I have mixed feelings about it, but I do think that the effort to touch on religion in such a profound way for both Khalid and for Zatara, I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, um, yeah. Clearly, that was a point of emphasis for them. And I guess execution, is obviously another category, but yeah, I mean, I thought that was interesting. Yeah, but I mean, I guess I'll let you
Yeah,
go.
I mean, so like again, I thought in Zatara, I thought it made a lot of sense. Um, I with Khalid, I like that his faith brought him the calm and the serenity to kind of calm his mind essentially, kind of get him to kind of understand perspective of what he is trying to do and what his mission is, because we see his inner struggle is this kind of ideal that like he's this Muslim man and that him and his family, his mom, who comes from a side of sorcerers that include Kent Nelson, that they've given that up for a higher calling, which is to Allah, and that he's turning his back on that by pursuing this sorcery. And even the fact, I guess the part that I think got a little like cringy for me a bit was just how aggressive it was about, oh, you're disobeying your mom, well, you're being a bad Muslim. And I know that's not obviously his actual mom saying that, but like I thought it was weird to have like this very harsh view of Islam, even if it is kind of an insecure look at it. While when you introduce Satara, Satara, there was no critical look at Christianity and how like Fate doesn't challenge Satara on his Christianity at all. You know what I'm saying? He just listens. With Khalid, his mom is saying, "Oh, you're a bad Muslim. You're not doing the things that we ascribe to believe in." And I thought that was some of that was a little like. It was a little heavy-handed. I thought a little bit. I don't know how you felt.
Yeah, I don't think that they were necessarily, the messaging there wasn't necessarily coming from the writers as much as it was. I think they were creating a scenario that was supposed to speak to, I guess, people that deal with those same conundrums, and those same. I wouldn't. I'm not.
Neither am I. For those listening, watching the show, I don't want to cast any aspersions. And if you are, definitely please leave a comment about what you thought about this section of the show. And for the Catholics and Christians who
that's a story that you see in media quite a bit.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we got it a little bit with the Violet character last season.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, we got it this season. They were talking about it, right?
Yeah, a little bit this season. There was a little bit last season as well.
And so, that's not a story that we've never seen before. They just threw that in there. It was curious, obviously, that it was coming from the mom who was converted. That was more that was a twist.
I thought it was a cool twist. I thought it was a twist that I liked a lot, actually.
It's possible.
Yeah.
It's an interesting sort of twist. But yeah, I think they were just going for that sort of story of the young adult character who's having to balance those sorts of things.
Two worlds, and one being their faith. And I like the premise and the execution at time. Like the execution, I thought was mixed. I thought that him explaining that in his eyes, magic is this tool given by God to save and heal people, just like science is. And like I thought that was like a very interesting way to look at it. And again, juxtaposing these real ideals like secular religion with superheroes and magic is not something that's normally done in a thoughtful way. And I thought that was a lot of that was very thoughtful. Again, I think the only thing that I think held me back from like loving the Khalid angle, which is why I think the Mary angle worked the best, was I thought some of the critiques for Khalid not being a Muslim, I thought felt a little superficial. It just felt like, oh, you're not being a doctor and you're not listening to your mom, so you're not a good Muslim. I thought that, again, to repeat, I also understand that it is this kind of these insecurities that he's bringing about, that his mom's not actually telling him these things. There's many things, maybe things he thinks his mom will say to him or would say to him, but we don't actually know. And that's important. Again, I think that's important to give the full context for what they're trying to do. I just thought it could have been done a little bit more finesse, just a little bit. And I think it wouldn't have came off as cringy when those moments happened. But I thought the visual of just like him drowning, I thought the visual again with the Tracy stuff was disturbing. Let's get to Mary real quick, because I think that as all three of these characters are pretty interesting, especially considering Khalid's potential future as Dr. Fate. But Mary, being part of the Shazam family and her being part of the story, I think opened a lot of eyes, considering Mary, whether it be Mary Marvel or what other iterations that we've seen of Mary. She's probably the most well-known member of the Shazam family that's not, of course, Billy Batson, Shazam himself. And it was funny to see, just again, how this show will put you in a place where you think you know where it's going and you don't actually know for sure. So it's been weird trying to see Mary play this weird kind of middle game where she's able to call on these powers at certain points in time, but she's not built like a Shazam. So it's like I wasn't even sure exactly what was going on. We knew that she had given up being a hero and being on the team. We didn't quite know why. This story ends up kind of illustrating itself as essentially an addiction story. That Mary had gotten so addicted to being Sergeant Shazam, which is the code name that she was going with, that she separated herself from every other aspect of her life, essentially. And as Billy Batson in this test vision, whatever you want to call it, basically said that, look, you had to get this up cold turkey in order to stop this, because you were separating yourself from everything that existed. Young Justice always finds a way to touch on interesting and dark and very important topics through various means. One, did you see how I saw that this was essentially an addiction story being told, and also did you like how it was executed? I thought that it was pretty compelling.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting. I mean, that was, like you said, they all were sort of dark to their own degrees, but that was a dark one. Not a twist that we had necessarily seen coming.
I totally expected the issue with her being, Shazam was gonna be just involved in maybe just immaturity. She botched the mission somewhere, and they're like, yo, you need to chill for a bit. I totally didn't think that we'd see it go that dark, but it did.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a story again, we're talking about being unique. You don't necessarily see. I mean, it's not like it's never been done, but it's a rare story. The superhero that kind of has gone too far, with the power hungry superhero. It's a rare story you see, particularly one that has to be forced into retirement essentially.
Yeah. And for it to be a child, teens and children deal with addictions as well, and to see that play out for someone who was a teenager, also I think is again a different look than we're accustomed to seeing.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting story. And it was necessary backstory for her character. I would say the only thing that these scenes missed, from my perspective, because these scenes to me were the most like a normal Young Justice episode. Like kind of story arc or a storyline or sort of psychology, getting into the psychology of these
young heroes,
these young adult characters, and what they're going through. That's vintage Young Justice. I think the issue that I have is that they're doing it with these characters that we have no attachment to, and that's really just they're at the mercy of the way they're doing this season. We've only seen these characters in 2 or 3 previous episodes. They weren't really heavily featured. I mean, they were in them. They had moments, but this is probably the deepest we've gotten into them. But, you have to, like, if they gave this same story, this is the kind of story they would have given Calder or Wally in episode 18 of season 1 after we'd already seen them for 7
years. Yeah, that's true.
And now you give them this story arc, and you guys diving into their psychology, and it's a character that we
met 2 episodes ago.
Yeah, for these characters, the characters you met 2 episodes ago. Yeah. So you have to really assume that, all right, well, maybe you're excited based off the source material, which, like you mentioned, for the Mary Broomfield character, that may have had the biggest impact for you, but even then, that's not like that's an A-list character in her own right, and so that's the problem. I would say with what they were doing. I mean, I thought they were cool scenes, but they just didn't have the impact that those kind of scenes normally do, because they're doing it with characters that we hadn't really seen much of prior, and I don't really know how much more are we gonna get from
Yeah,
them
I
after this
think
arc. I haven't seen anything from Lady
right.
Shiva or Cassandra Savage
Yeah,
or Cassandra Kane. I should
and
say.
I think that's why to me the Khalid and the Mary one worked better because they hedged on issues that are very relatable. Again, addiction
Right, right, right.
and and balancing religion and balance towards with your religion and your faith and your whatever you do for your passion or your what you're pursuing in life. And that those are two very relatable things. So even if you don't know them as well, those I think still work very strong because anybody can relate to those stories. I think Tracy. That's why I thought Tracy's fell a bit short because hers relied on very personal insecurities that we just know very little about. We don't know her relationship with Blue Beetle very well. You know, it's a romantic relationship that we learn here, but we don't know much about it. So when Blue Beetle is saying these things to her, like it doesn't hit me as hard. Um, we don't know what happened with why she didn't join the Outsiders, other than what she tells us there. But like, we don't know how that's affected them. We haven't really seen the Outsiders this season, so we see them a little bit in this episode. And we'll probably talk about that in a second, but we don't see as much with that. Um, so you know, and even the whole issue with Zatanna making the cracks about her powers being corny, like we haven't seen her powers that much. So like it's just very little we've seen of 13 that I think that's why what you're saying is a good point. And that goes back to what I said earlier. I don't know how you feel. I mean, do you feel like Zatanna has really gotten the short end of the stick? Because a character that really could have probably allowed us to feel a little bit more personal toward that story is Zatanna. Because even though, again, we've talked at length about how she may not be one of quote original core characters, she was from season one and she's been around the team for a long time. And we've seen some of the struggles she's gone through, particularly the issues with her father. We don't really. I mean, it's like a Zatanna is like she's like the vehicle that drives all the people to the conflict, but that's it. Yeah. Like she's not really bringing anything else to the table other than support and support for her students and guidance slash requests to the likes of a Dr. Fate or a Phantom Stranger or Blood, and so that's where I think where I feel like if this arc is falling short. I think that's probably where it is. I think that there are a lot of fans that wanted to see more from Zatanna, and she's really for just being used as a vessel to get more out of these other characters.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that this series, what's been most interesting about this season, I should say, is that each arc is nothing like the other.
Yeah.
In some series that are like, look at Dragon Ball, for example. The four arcs, the main four arcs of Dragon Ball Z are all kind of similar. They all have a villain. They all have a main guy who's sort of the hero, quote unquote, and where he takes up the final battle. And there's other villains, that kind of get before you get to the main villain in every arc of Dragon Ball Z. If you've watched it before, in this season of Young Justice, I mean, you would think, oh, well, I mean, since Artemis was the lead of the last season and of the last arc, that Zatanna would get similar treatment in this arc that Artemis got in the last arc, and that's not the case. Like, the last arc was centered around Artemis, and it was kind of told from her point of view, and we got a lot of her backstory. We haven't gotten really any of that from Zatanna. I mean, she's in it. But like you said, it's kind of all over the place. We've gotten more backstory to Vandal Savage than we have for her. And it's not like we were clamoring for anything Zatanna related, but once you make her sort of the face of the arc, that's what makes it peculiar. And obviously these two arcs were nothing like the first arc of the season. So that's the most curious thing. But I mean, yeah, I mean it's slightly disappointing. It's also strange again that they put her in the in the opening of the series as
right.
She was going to get a really deep story, and I mean she's in it, and
she's certainly a main character in the story, but it's just very surface level with her. It's just, that's the best way to describe it, is that her story in this arc is super surface level. There's nothing deep about it.
Yeah,
and it's crazy because it's a very deep arc. Like there's a lot of important themes, a lot of we're going back millennia. I mean, this is not like, oh, it's just like a surface level arc. Like, this is a very deep arc. It's just
but that's
the
problem
one character that you thought was going to be the center of it. It's just that's the one that's being treated with the least amount of care.
Because they have to spend so much time on the
new people and the lords of order and chaos for sure.
Yeah, the order and chaos. Like, she had nothing to do with any of that.
Right.
So, and none of the flashbacks. So because of that, you know, that's not gonna, you know, you're not gonna expound on her character in any way because.
So after Zatara makes his case to Nabu that, hey man, we gotta join this fight. Right as that happens, it's funny because like it's almost like that argument is happening while he's listening to Zatanna, which I thought maybe spoke to his like power that he can only be in two places at once. Like he's like telling Zatanna get out of here while also Zatara is like talking to him actively. Like I even like, you know, the way it was kind of like they showed that, I was kind of like, oh my god, that's kind of cool. Like, so this whole conversation is happening literally while Zatanna is here explaining why they need to join the fight. I thought that was pretty neat.
By the way, who's grown more unrecognizable in the last few years, Zatara or David Letterman?
Oof, man, Zatara, man, he been through it, man. It was crazy, and I love that they actually put his season 1 character model, you know, in those promos to show you just what he looked like before. And you know, just because you may not really be seeing him, doesn't mean he don't age. And it sounds like he may be aging worse than maybe even the normal person because of just what he's going through, being in this hell that he's in. And you know, when they talked I don't know, last week, or I think it was a couple weeks ago, when you know Savage was talking to him, you know, Fate, about, you know, I don't know if you can take this child out with that old body in there. We kind of saw that, you know, front and center with how much Zatara has aged in that conversation he had with Nabu. But as that's happening, you know, it's like it seems as if, you know, Fate's almost zoned out, but he is listening to Zatara while Zatanna is pleading their case, and all of a sudden they get bangs at the door. It's Clarion. So what I would expect is that there's going to be maybe some dialogue between Clarion and not dialogue, but there'll be some flashback to the connection between Clarion and Fate that perhaps, you know, we are not familiar with. We know Fate was sent to restore order at a time where Clarion was, you know, bestowing chaos. Clarion actually coming to him for help suggests that there is a relationship there that I hope will get explored, even though Clarion may not necessarily really be an active part of the present day story anymore, because Child and Flaw meet him right at the door essentially, and you know, Child essentially says, "All right, we've had enough of this. Flaw, you know, kill you know, his our anchor." So the cat, Mr. Tinkle, he's neck is snapped, killed, pretty much on sight immediately, even though he turned into a saber-tooth tiger, which is pretty neat to see. We've seen that in the past, but was no match for Flaw. As we say in Mortal Kombat, a flawless victory in that showdown. And you know, Clarion, first of all, you see him cry, he's in tears, so that's kind of a, you know, someone who's so evil, it's kind of like, man, that was kind of tough to see. And then he ends up becoming essentially matter and just floats away. So I don't know if that means that Clarion, I don't think he's dead, but you know, his anchor to Earth is dead. So perhaps that means he goes to the ends of space to deal with the other lords who were disappointed in him, and I don't know how that will work out, but it seems that he's basically been scratched off of the equation. And considering how you know, we know that it's not surprising that Zatanna and the kids are concerned about what they just saw, but Fate's eyes also very concerned about what he just saw Flaw easily do to Clarion's anchor. You know, that's probably going to set up a major showdown with, you know, the kids, Zatanna and Fate, against you know. And also, by the way, earlier in the episode, Zatanna had told Blood and Stranger to recruit other people. We don't know who those people will be, but I'm assuming they're going to join the fight, and it'll be fascinating, you know, if we get some more interesting characters from the DC lore that show up here. But essentially,
will Shamari's guy, John Constantine, show up?
Oh man, maybe. I mean, you know, Shamari, I know he talked about wanting Constantine. I told you guys I was Constantined out, Uh,
Yes.
I wouldn't mind seeing a Swamp Thing maybe.
Will we get the entire Dark? Yeah. Will we
Yeah,
get Dead Man?
yeah,
Will
maybe
we get
all of them.
Swamp
Yeah,
Thing?
I mean, you never know. You certainly never know. But they're going to get some help. Uh, how did you see that ending, and how do you see this next week playing out before we get to the Beast Boy angle real quick?
Yeah, I mean, I thought that was definitely, again, reminder that this is not on Cartoon
Yeah,
Network with the Saber-Tooth Tiger and Snapped. I mean, that was, unfortunate. PETA will be calling Warner Media very soon. But yeah, I mean, that was dark. But yeah, I mean, look, I mean, they're continuing to sort of, you know, put over,
yeah,
Flaw and Child, in terms of their power level. Clearly, they're going to be a tough adversary. I don't think that anyone that we've seen is going to take them out individually. So when we talk about bringing other people in to join the fight, this looks like this may be a collective effort to take down Child and Flaw.
yeah. I agree with that. It looks like it's gonna have to be, especially because it seemed like, like that scene to me felt like it kind of put in perspective that was Child really even you know, in their full form in the previous, fights that we
Right.
saw. Like the fact that they were able to just get Mr. Tinkle out of here in like a second. I'm just like, oh damn, why did they do that back there? And it's like maybe she was messing around. Maybe she wasn't actually trying to, do that kind of damage. Like now, the situation's getting more dire.
I think Shimura will be particularly excited if Constantine shows up and Clarion never shows up again. So,
I'll
definitely
tell
have
you
to
what,
put him on.
Shamari, shout out to our brother and co-host on this. He will do that trade every day of the week and twice on Sunday if we get a Constantine for Clarion trade. Before we get to the scores, we should, I guess, quickly mention, they continue the Beast Boy angle again. He's clearly, once again, still depressed. But it seems like now, and it's ironic because, it's been, a couple months now, but it's starting to become more noticeable to the outsiders. They have a mission call, and Stargirl, is with Wonder Girl, but they're going on a mission, and they're like, "You coming?" And he's like, "Oh no, you guys got it." And he's like, "What do you mean you guys got it? Like, what the hell?" And he
Yeah,
sleeps through the mission, and then they come back, and he's still sleeping on the couch, and Stargirl kind of gives him crap for it. She really said, "Yo, dude, like, what's going on? What's your deal?" And he snaps and says, like, you guys are upset when I'm sleeping. You say I'm not getting enough sleep. Like, what do you guys want from me? And leaves. And he's definitely starting to see those rifts within the team because of his inactivity right now. We see his room continue to be even more of a mess. There are pills everywhere. I am hoping those are sleeping pills. I don't think that they're other kind of pills, but I know we've seen him buy sleeping pills. I'm assuming that's what they are. But again, with this show, things can get very dark, so you don't know what's going on. And the story arc is probably the darkest story arc they've gone on so far. We get to we're getting to the last episode of this arc at this point. Do you see this having any? I feel like there needs to be kind of a resolution to this thing the next episode. Like, I thought that this was the episode where I kind of was like, okay, like, how many more episodes am I going to see Beast Boy?
we haven't moved.
Yeah, how many more episodes I'm seeing him being sad? Like, I like that finally you had, like, someone, someone who's a part of the Outsiders really kind of challenging him for, like, what's going on. And not in the way that, like, Blue Devil did, but more in, like, come on, man, what the hell are you doing? Because that's just a natural, inclination that anybody will have. It's a natural reaction. But I think that they're at the point now where I want to see some change. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means someone says, "Yo, we're gonna send you to get help," and maybe the next arc is him getting help, or he descends into a worse situation. But it just can't be the status quo. It can't be him living in that tower, sleeping in Hollywood like that. We can't keep doing that. I gotta see something change with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm like you. I'm kind of TBD on whether or not this is working or not. I have to kind of see where it ends.
This is the first episode where I really was starting to feel like, oh man, is this working? I don't know if I had that question before.
Yeah.
Because I think they're telling an important story,
me,
but this felt a little bit like this isn't moving fast enough.
To me, I think this is again, they want to tell us, they want to do the season a certain way and whatnot, but this is another story that I think is slightly hurt by the fact that they're telling it in arcs. And last season was Young Justice Outsiders, and the Outsiders were so heavily featured, and in this season you barely see them, and it's sort of a mismatch of a team that characters that you don't really see that much anyway, and so it doesn't have the impact as if they were the sole focus of the season or the sole focus of the arc. Um, those at least those team arcs.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
The Beast Boy
yeah.
character we're still attached to, but his inclusion or his you know, involvement with the outsiders is sort of it's so on the periphery at this point that you know they treated it like a
Yeah, I
character,
mean, I was gonna
which
say
is
like
why.
if these scenes are him talking to Nightwing and Aquaman, there's a totally different feel. You know, we know Cassie a little bit because she's been a fairly prominent member, but we don't know this Argo very well at all. You know, we don't know Blue Devil that well at all. So like these
Yeah,
interactions, while we know they're important to him because these are very important members of the Outsiders and important figures linked to the Outsiders, because again, as you said, with how this whole season is going, because we don't know them as well, do these situations hit as well or as they're supposed to? And I think that's a good point that perhaps they're not. So I think that that's something they gotta figure out. I think that there needs to be some kind of again movement in the story. I don't know. It doesn't have to be solved, but it just has to. There just has to be a shift. I think there will be. I think that's my. I'm pretty confident there will be. But I felt like this was the episode. I was like, okay, I cannot see another episode of him just laying around in that bed. Like he can't.
yes, they're the means to an
Yeah,
end.
it's got to be something.
They're foreshadowing something.
I'm scared of what it is. I mean, this is a very scary story, so I don't look forward to it. But I just thought that this was like okay, we've gotten the point now about what's going
Yeah, I
on.
mean, any darker, and then I'm like, this show becomes Degrassi, which
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if they're gonna go down that path of anything like that. But I mean, you know, I don't Cartoon Network anymore, so
Yeah. Yeah. This.
I don't know. You say you don't know
Yeah.
what
This
to
is clearly a
expect.
much more mature story that they're going for as a whole. So yeah, I think almost anything's on the table for what's going to happen to him, which is again very sad considering how much we love Beast Boy. I think this is a good point to do episode scores though. So I'll let you go first. What are you going to give episode 11? Teg Ydaer, but I will say again, get ready as the actual name of the episode. What are you going to give a score out of 10 for this one?
Out of 10, I'll go 7. I
7.
thought this
Wow,
was a
that's a little. That might be the lowest score you've given this season.
uh,
7.
uh
It
maybe.
might be.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it might
I
be.
have to go through the. I have to go through the
I
archives.
yeah, I mean this was a decent episode. I mean there was I mean I mentioned how a lot of the stuff with the Sentinels were hurt by the fact that those characters aren't necessarily legacy characters or characters that we've seen uh, much of in the past. And so while there were some interesting stories and Vince's Young Justice, I would have liked to have seen those characters get fleshed out far more before we got those kinds of that kind of development.
Right.
Um, it felt very rapid. I would have liked to have seen these characters just interact in normal environments before we got to really get into their psychology. But yeah, I mean, I thought that that was cool. The Vandal Savage, Naboo stuff was interesting, but not quite as interesting as the Vandal Savage Atlantis stuff. Um, and look, I mean, just again, quite a lot of exposition. So it wasn't terrible. I mean, it was an interesting episode, but fell short in a lot of ways as well.
Yeah, I will go 8. And I could maybe be talking to going 8.5, but I'll go 8 for now. I like this episode. I really did. I liked again, and I preface that by saying this is an arc. This whole arc is just going to be a thing where either it's for you or it's not. It's very bold.
Yeah,
It's a very bold choice for Young Justice to do this because when you consider okay, you're gonna have 4 or 5 episodes that are similar to this formatting. You could have people decide I'm going to tune out because I'm not interested in what's going on, and do you lose viewers like that instead of telling uh, a more linear story with the same characters, which is what we've seen from Young Justice for the previous 3 seasons. But I'm enjoying like this ride. I'm enjoying learning about some of these newer characters that we're not as accustomed to. Again, I wish we learned more about Satana. I wish that some of the Khalid Islam stuff regarding the stuff coming from his mom in that test from Dr. Fate would have been a little bit more finesse. But overall, I'm still liking it. I think I hear you that the Vandal Savage stuff maybe took a step back in terms of his backstory. But to me, I would argue this isn't really a Vandal Savage story this week. This is actually more of a Naboo story. Like, this is Naboo's origin, really. And he's telling the story, and maybe you're right. Maybe that is the problem with that. But yeah, to me, the story is told from mostly his perspective. He's literally the one narrating it, and it's a lot about him. I guess the reason why it didn't bother me as much was because so much of the first 2 episodes were explaining the Lords of Chaos and what their deal is. There had to be some explanations of what the Lords of Order are. We know that Naboo is the champion for them, and I thought the way they came about picking him and going about it, I thought was cool. So I liked it. Definitely see some flaws with it. I feel like this is a weird arc, Kendall, where I feel like, you know, is it going to be easily wrapped up in this next episode? You know, in some ways, I feel like this arc probably needs a little bit more episodes, but we're not going to get any. This is the end. So, I'm interested in how they finish this because.
Well, yeah, I think once you take Flaw and Child off the map, that'll kind of clear everything up, basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it seems like that's where it'll crescendo. How they deal with that is something that remains to be seen.
Yeah, but when you're bringing in new characters, you know, next week to help make that happen, you know, again, does that conflate the story? Does it make it more tricky? I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'm still curious. I don't know what the deal is with the school bus. The school bus of kids that was, you know, in the credits.
Yeah,
you know, they're screaming. Yeah. I don't think it's a gag. I think that there's some story to be told, but
I thought that was a gag.
No, I think there's something going on. I mean, these are the same kids that were in season 1 of Young Justice. Those same bus drivers, same kids, and then we saw them in season 3, and then we saw them earlier this season, and we saw them with in space. That was the one where it was okay. This is getting very weird. And now you see them going through some kind of wormhole or some kind of portal or whatever. I don't know. I can't even begin to tell you what is going on, but I think something is going on. Greg Weisman on Twitter was very coy about talking about what it is. So that tells me that there's definitely something. I think if it was a gag, he probably would have just admitted it. But something's weird with that, and you know, we'll have to just wait and see what happens with that. I think that's a good point to leave it here. So thank you guys for checking out this edition of our Young Justice episode recap and review. Of course, if you like this episode of our review, make sure you leave a comment in the comment section of what you thought about this episode, how you think the arc is going to end next week. Also, be sure to give us a like by hitting that like button if you did enjoy this video, and of course, subscribe to the channel, New Generation Media, for more Young Justice content. We got one more episode before we go on hiatus here with the Young Justice episodes for this season. So, hope to have you guys with us next week to talk more YJ. Thank you guys for checking us out. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.